Hello and welcome to the Still Standing series. I'm your host, Violet Coots, and I am happy to have my special guest today, Anne Wooten. I'm a spiritual life coach helping women cultivate an intimate relationship with God, equipping and empowering them to walk in the freedom and purpose God has given them. I'd love for you to grab my free biblical affirmation cards so you can start renewing your mind. And if you're feeling stuck in your relationship with God, schedule a free breakthrough session with me. We will have those links in the bio. Hello, Anne.
Hi, Violet. How are you?
I am good. And how are you today?
I'm doing fantastic. It's a beautiful day.
It is. It is here as well. So I'm so happy that you're here with me today. So we've talked some, and so I know a little about your story. We have several things that kind of intersect, I think, and
Yes,
overlap.
we do.
Yes, but so just tell everybody about you, who you are, and introduce yourself a little, and then tell us what God has done in your life.
I will love to do that. I'm Anne Wooten, and I am a Christian Kingdom life coach, ex-accountant from 50 years working in accounting field. Um, I would say, I was first, let's just start. I'm just going to start from the beginning.
Yeah,
I think that would probably be the easiest thing because that's kind of where my story kind of developed from the
sure.
past. When I was growing up, my mother's kind of nudged me. We always went to church, and but she also nudged me one day. She said, when we really didn't talk about faith-based things, our family was just like that. So she kind of nudged me one day and said, Anne, I think it's time for you to go talk to the pastor for you to join the church. That's how she put it. And I'm like, I knew I went to Sunday school and everything. So I knew about Jesus and I knew, all about that, but it was the head knowledge.
Right.
And so it took at least 2 sessions with a pastor to even kind of begin to comprehend, how Jesus sacrificed his life for us and that we are forgiven of our sins over 2,000 years ago. But I did grasp that knowledge. But, it's like when you're 12 years old, you don't understand the full concept. You get it,
Mm.
and you do accept him into your heart. But it's like anything else in life, we grow, we learn, and everything else.
Yes.
And I was raised, my father was in World War II, and my mother and father, so that tells you when they were about born, they were born during the Depression. They lived during World War II, and they were married in 1943.
Mm.
And I learned from a project just I did recently about how vulnerable my mother was. I learned another side of her that I never knew because I read letters 2 months after they were married. And he only had a furlough of 1 week. So in two
Oh,
and a
wow.
half years, he was in the World War II. I think without any hard facts, I think that's the only time they were really together from 43 to when he was discharged in November 45. So you're talking about 2.5 years, but the letters, it's like the young love and everything. And I just never heard my mother growing up say those things.
Right.
But I did see that there was that part of her. And I saw her vulnerabilities, her insecurities, and that made a greater appreciation now for what I did, for myself. Because, growing up, I guess it was their generation. They didn't show affection physically, like a hug much,
Right.
or they wouldn't say that they loved you, even though they did.
Right. Yeah. I
Um,
grew up the same way, and we didn't. I don't remember an I love you, and we didn't hug, but you're right. My parents were, were older as well. And that, so yes, I believe it was from the time that, part of that was the era that they were in.
Yeah, but we were born, or I was born so much later, there's a generation kind of gap.
Yeah.
And when you see your friends and their parents be some way, they show the affection. They tell them that they're proud of them and they tell them that they love them, and you don't see it
Yeah.
and you don't feel it. You don't feel it. You start feeling unloved, unworthy, and the list goes on and on. And then resentments build. You get a little angry. That's when the people pleasing starts. The perfectionism of imposter syndrome starts. And then you self manufacture the lies. And then Satan says, I want you to believe them. So, that was a kind of a hard pill to swallow, because I went out of my way for friends and with my family. I would just go out of my way to try to do things to gain their acceptance, to gain their approval, even just to say, good job, Anne.
Right.
But the only thing we're doing is hurting ourselves.
Yeah. But we
And
don't know that at the time.
no, we don't.
We don't
And
understand that. We don't comprehend that.
no, we don't, because we choose to believe something else. And but over the years, I'm going to say my parents, they were the greatest parents. I mean, they were really good, and they set good moral values, and I love them very much. It's just I did wish for other things, and what things, even things today, I wish things could be different, but you can't change the past. But all you can do is, like everything else, learn from it. And then it becomes your story later on, or God says it anyway.
Right. That's right.
But, over the years, my faith grew. And even the only times I ever reverted back to those, we all backslide because we're all sinners and fall short of the glory of God. Romans 3:23, I believe that is. And having known that, during those times where I would backslide, it seems like I reverted back to those resentments, the people pleasing. It
Mhm.
was just, but I never felt like I needed to get to the root of the problem or to find out what it was, because I would do like a lot of people, just put it on the back burner and say, forget it, because then I would get up again and, excuse me, and my faith would get stronger and stronger, but then it would go again. But it seems like the times it would backslide, those times when you do it repeatedly over the process, maybe of 50 years, or, that in my case, that's about how long it was. And it's like those times you get these, it gets more intense
Mhm.
because it gets a little worse. And I think that's one way of God grabbing your attention.
Right. Yes.
But in 2019, God really grabbed my attention after about 8 or 9 months of not going to church, not reading my Bible, not praying, but being a couch potato in front of the TV. And that's sad to say, that started, if I didn't start doing something, it would have started wreaking havoc on my health,
Mhm.
physically and mentally.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so gradually, I found a new church in November of 2019, which I go to now. That started help. And it was a church I didn't even think about visiting, just
Okay.
because of the distance. But
Right.
now, since they built the new interstate, or the loop around Charlotte, it's a lot easier to get to and a lot quicker. But it was that, but it was also mostly God calling and said, Anne, you need to you need to grab hold of it and grasp and acknowledge the root of the problem. And if you're ready, I'm going to show you. You're not going to like what you, but you've got to do it.
Right.
And that's when he kind of showed me in, I think it was November. I've kind of that year, I kind of remembered it's like I learned that it was myself. I was my own worst enemy, doing the self manipulation and believing that.
Yeah.
But also, if there's sins of unforgiveness, then it leaves you disconnected from God.
Yeah.
And the only thing you can't run around it, you can't walk around it. You got to push through and walk through it.
Yeah. And they can run deep, can't they?
They can.
Unforgiveness can run deep, can't it?
Yeah, it's messy, it's painful, and it's not easy to go through. But I can remember that day when God said, "Fine," and I made the choice because I felt that tug on my heart that I could no longer ignore. Getting too intense, you couldn't breathe. And so both of my parents were deceased, but I live about an hour away from where my hometown where I grew up. And but God said, for symbolic reasons only, drive to your hometown and just stand over their graves. Even though they are in heaven, that's the closest thing where I could get to them.
Right.
And but before I got on the interstate, and this is where rainbows have a very special place in my heart, because rainbows, as we both know, first one appeared in Genesis with Noah after the great flood, and God promised Noah that he would never flood the earth again. And the promise was done by rainbow.
Mm.
And before I got on the interstate to drive to go to my hometown, I noticed a rainbow going in the very direction that was there in the very direction I was going.
Wow.
And it's a busy road, of a busy 4-lane road on a Saturday afternoon, but there was just enough time for me just to stop quickly and take a picture. For some reason, and I still have it on my phone, so it's time and date stamped.
Yeah. That's awesome.
But I proceeded on, and I could feel the peace when I was there standing over the graves and just looking up.
Mm.
And it was just, there's a 3-part thing I believe you have to do. And it's like, yes, God, for myself, everything was inward. Everybody's is different.
Right.
But for myself, I've got to take care of the self part before I'm able, I believe, that we can forgive somebody else. And so I just ask God to please forgive me for the resentment and bitterness and all the people pleasing and not letting Him be the one who I seek my approval from. And so I felt like that was answered. But then here comes the self forgiveness, which is the hardest part because we hold the guilt, we're hard on ourselves, and that's natural human tendency to do that. And so I just ask God to please release the guilt from me, help me to forgive myself and to give myself grace because that is so vitally important.
Right.
Yeah. And that took a lot of guts to do that one more than anything else, I will say, and I probably will always be a little hard on myself, but I don't stay there like I used to.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, because that's that weak spot that Satan will come in and attack and say, no more. But then that third one is when I feel like I kind of looked up and I said, Mom, Dad, if you can hear me, God, if you can really hear me, I apologize. I'm sorry for all the resentments that I never told you I had. And I'm sorry that I wish things were different. And I'm sorry that I did not say anything. And I just felt forgiven.
Mm.
I felt a peace,
Yeah.
but nothing like what happened later. Is because on the drive home, I prayed, I said, God, I feel like I'm forgiven, but we humans, and you know me, we like to see tangible evidence, something physical. But
Yep.
I pulled into my subdivision about 3 hours later. I stopped because I had to pull over and tears started coming flowing because in the distance was another rainbow over the entire subdivision. And from that vantage point,
Ooh.
the highest part of that rainbow looked like it was right over my house.
Oh, wow. That just gave me chills. I just
That's
got
why
chills right then.
yeah, rainbows are so special to me because it's not a coincidence. That is an answer from God, and He answered my prayer. That was the first one He never answered that quickly, and I
Oh,
praise Him for it. But that was kind of a pivotal point that started the progression to where I'm at now.
okay. Yeah. And isn't he so good, that he wants us to know him and he wants us to realize this and he does those things for us. And oh yeah, that's beautiful. That's wonderful.
Oh
So
yeah.
now you said where you are now. So bring us up to date from there.
Okay. From that, that was 2019. And so, I always have to go through the COVID lockdowns, appeared the next 2 years, 2020 and 2021. But my faith, like some people's, their faith maybe did not grow because people, we need to be surrounded by people
Mhm.
in their communities within our church. That's just how we're made.
Yep.
But of course, we were limited and to do.
Yep.
I am grateful that during those times that my faith grew instead of going in the other direction. It was gradual. It wasn't to
Right.
where is now,
Right.
but it was gradual. But I during that time, and this is what really brought on the writing and led me to writing and even now coaching. It was the Canadian long time running series Heartland.
Oh, I love that show.
It's one of the better shows. I don't, you don't always have to agree with everything how they write,
Right.
but for TV like it is now, it's one of the better shows to watch.
Yeah.
And I loved the way that sometimes they would write the character stories. And Amber Marshall plays Amy, the lead actress who traveled horses, which I love horses. And then Graham Wardle played Ty Borton, and he went from they wrote him as like a juvenile delinquent, but he got into that family, got really good, moral values were presented to him, put himself through vet school until, he decided, it was time for him to leave the show.
Yes. He broke a lot of hearts.
He did, but there is a story with him that leads me to where I'm at now. Because if it weren't for him, I would not be a writer.
Wow. That's amazing.
Um, I've never met him personally, but after he left the show, and I binge watched it, during those 2 years, when I discovered that he left, I kind of wanted to figure out, what he was all about. Not that I was a crazed, fan, just had to find, but it's because of the appreciation of how he was the actor who played that part.
Yeah.
I knew that probably was, I don't know, God said, I want you to do a little research on him. I didn't hear those words, but it was just an inclination that I
Mhm.
got. So, I searched Graham over on Twitter and I saw that, his fiscal, values were kind of like mine, being an accountant. That's kind of where I gravitated first. Then I learned he had a podcast and he had a community over on Substack.com. And Substack is a writer's paradise.
Okay.
But and that's where my blog is now. But I I felt God in January 2022 to say, I want you to become a member of that community. And I'm like, I kind of asked the question, I'm like, why? I mean, what is, I know he's a podcast and I know he does write poetry, but I'm like, why would I do that?
Right.
But God says, just do it. Basically, because I had no idea what I was getting into. But Substack is where a place where you can share your writings and people can subscribe and they can comment.
Okay.
So and he had his podcast, over there too. So I said, okay, I'm gonna listen, God. I know I know not to not listen to you.
Right.
So I just went on and became a member. What I found out at first was a lot of the members were close to my age, and they were a lot of born again Christians.
Okay.
So I began to understand a little bit, but I would not have known that if I didn't start commenting on some of the writings and on some of their comments, other
Right.
people would make. So I felt like God was beginning to bring me out of my shell of being an introvert and bringing me out
Mm.
slowly but surely. So, but there was one podcast, and it was podcast number 20 that came out in February, about a month after I joined. And that was podcast with one of his friends, Donny Mack. He's a singer, songwriter, and actor himself.
Wow.
But he has a dynamite story, a dynamite testimony. He's a man of faith who I've now met personally 3 times. He is the one that gave me the songwriting
Oh, wow.
and the love that I remembered that I have for the acoustic guitar. So I could relate to him as far as the music and faith. Graham is very good as far as introducing me to the writing because he challenged us, but he also has the mindset that he wants people to get out of their comfort zones and be their authentic, true selves. So I put what
Mm.
Graham says and what he does, and then I asked God, what do you want me to take from that? And how do you want me to apply that to my life?
Okay.
And I've always done that from day one. So Graham is the one that introduced the writing to me, and we would have monthly Zoom calls, and there was times that I got to talk to him on those Zoom calls. And
Isn't
then
it amazing how God just connects people from like all over the world? And,
mhm,
you know, the pandemic, it's got a lot of negatives and things that come from it, but you know, we wouldn't have met, you and I
yeah,
wouldn't have met, if it wasn't God's moved things around and with Zoom and things like that. So it's amazing, it's God when he makes those connections of who we're supposed to connect with
yeah,
when we listen and when we obey, right?
that's exactly right. You have to trust and you have to obey.
Yeah,
But then you have to be still and quiet enough to be able to listen and
that's right.
hear. But all that said, it was just Graham it was a gradual thing. And then there was a choice that I had to make. And I think about June of 2022. It's like I felt led to do it to start a blog because I felt like it was going to help me to be more transparent
Mhm.
and learn to express myself. But there was another choice that I could have made, but it would have taken me away from that. And I said, God, I said, I know I need a quick answer to make this decision. And I said, but I only want to do what your will is. And so I said, if you want me to do the blog, I need a name. The next morning, I was brushing my teeth. One day at a time came out.
Oh,
And
wow.
so I knew the answer was the blog, which that's the way I was inclined feeling that was the way to go. But you still like that clarity.
Right.
And so through that, and then Graham would introduce an August writing challenge that year. And it was challenging us to write poetry. So there's where poetry came in for me. So, and then across that time, I got to meet Donny for the first time in Nashville in June of 2022. And there was just that immediate connection. And that's
Oh,
when he told me how to write a song in 5 minutes. And I'm like,
oh, wow.
Okay, that's easy for you to say,
Yeah.
but but he has more of a talent at it than I do. I still have to work about it, and it's got to be God centered. But anyway, through that, and then in August of 2022, he was able to come and kind to my house.
Oh,
Donny was, and then there was people from within the Time Has Come community could come here and meet him. And so he gave us a little private concert and everything, and it was just so good.
that's
And
amazing.
but through that, I could feel in 2023 there was a pivotal change coming at work. Being an accountant, you understand that there's being in finance, or I was a project accountant on the construction side,
Yeah.
but you kind of get an idea or a sense if things are changing or in the company. And
Mhm.
I didn't know what it would be because I worked on the construction division. There were more than one divisions within the company,
Gotcha.
but I just felt stressed the first 5 or 6 months of last year. And I could just feel it getting gradual, and I knew that if I stayed, I knew that it was gonna take me away from my love of writing on that blog because it was beginning to build, the audience was beginning to build within it was mostly the community of Time Has Come, but even at that, I would have lost it. But that tug on your heart just gets more intense.
Yeah.
And I had no intentions of this early to step away from accounting, but God was preparing me big time for the next part of the journey. And on June of last year, on my birthday, right after my quiet time and prayer, tears just started coming. But I knew that it was the time to step away from accounting. And as soon as I made that decision, there was an inner peace, although there was insecurity about the financial unknown for the future. I had stuff saved up, but it was not my intention to go into those funds
Right.
right now.
Right.
But God's taught me a lot in the last year about trusting Him for financial provisions.
Yeah.
And but if I had not stepped away, I took a beta writing course to understand what the entrepreneurship of a writer was. And that's when I discovered a lot were podcasters,
Mhm.
they were coaches, speakers, and and then I also understood what it was really like if you ever wanted to have a book really published, or because I got training from an actual publisher and an actual agent.
Wow.
But the coaching thing is what intrigued me because I was like, well, what, could bring the income in, even though I wouldn't do it just for those reasons, because I knew I'd be unapologetically faith-based. So towards the end of that, I guess, program in about September, I was about finishing up. It was either August or September of last year. That's when my cousin, whom is like a sister to me because I just have an older brother, she sent me in Facebook Messenger something, and you never know whether to click on those because even though it's from a trusted source, you never know if it's spam.
Right.
But there was Coach Francine Ivy's information, and because Francine knew my cousin when they used to live in North Carolina or Boone, because my
Wow.
cousin lived in Wilkes County, the neighboring county.
Gotcha.
And it's like clicked on it, and then it took 2 calls with me before I committed, because the first one was information, but then I felt like investing in that, I needed clarity to make sure
Mhm.
that I wasn't going to waste my time, Francine's. I needed to make sure it was right.
Right.
And I took the second call and I just knew it was right because we both know Francine is faith-based. She's a powerhouse
Yes. Yeah.
and love her to death. But I knew for myself, one-on-one was better for me to have because that's kind of the way I do. I would approach coaching more on a one-on-one. It's not that I can't do a group, but at this time, I think that's where I'm led to do more of. But the thing is, when as I came through January of this year, right after the holidays, that's when going through the program with Francine, she identified, she said, Anne, you're what they call a freedom coach. And we both know what that freedom coach means. And I went back because I started writing acronyms in July of last year. Because with I'm going to backtrack just a little bit
Okay.
because in July of last year, after I did step down from accounting, the financial insecurities just got the best of me. But it's not a mistake for what happened. It was just something that God allowed to finally say, and I told you, you know.
Yeah.
But so I took about 3 weeks later, I started a contract to perm position, and it paid, nearly the same or a little bit more what I was making before. But when I was interviewed and when I started, they were very misguided.
Mm.
I was reporting to a different manager, and that manager, it would have been trouble if I had stayed. Maybe 30 years ago, I could take it, but I could just see the writing on the wall. And it was and when you're in the contract part of it, then it's not so bad if you wanted to leave. And I knew she was going to be on vacation the next week. So on the seventh day in the middle of the day at 12:45, I shredded my notes. I cut off my computer, the printer, got my stuff. There was nobody around. It was quiet. And I walked out the front door, got in my car, drove across the street, and then called them and told them I wasn't coming back. But when I got home, the first word, and I went back to look when Francine told me a freedom coach, the first acronym I ever wrote was on the word freedom.
Mm.
So that's another indicator that if was God,
Yeah.
telling me. And I haven't stopped writing the acronyms since then. But
Yeah,
I just
I've not read them all, but I've read a lot of them and they're awesome. They're always awesome. Uh,
yeah, but fast forward, I was certified in March, and but through Francine, she said, Anne, take your blog post, combine them into a book and self-publish it and put it on Amazon. And so when I went back to start reviewing, I had enough poems to bring together in a poetry book. So that's where the birth of Where Faith Takes Flight, because I love the nature. I love the birds. I like watching them. And my faith has just taken flight.
right.
And then the subtitle is One Day at a Time. And that's true. And that's where I feel like the faith is taken. I want to grow. I'm still learning. The website is still under construction, but I'm learning as I go, trying to I know that God has wanted me to help others. I don't want to limit it now to just women. I want to say, I want to help others
Right.
let go of their fear, grab hold of their faith, and unlock their God given calling, their purpose and calling, and live confidently based on biblical led strategies. Now,
That's awesome.
that's kind of my I help statement. And I know God has got me doing this, and if I have to trust His timing, He's provided everything. That's how we met, because in the same coaching community,
Yeah.
and it's wonderful because we can hold each other accountable. That we can also be there.
Yeah. Yes. Well, and as we established earlier and talked about earlier, we're made for community. We're
Mhm.
made for community, and we've learned over the years, especially after the COVID or during and everything, that community can look differently than what we thought.
Oh, yes.
I
And
have, I've gotten so many friends that I never would have had. But as you're telling your story, it's like I'm seeing this just connect the dots, It's like take that one step, just like you said, one day at a time, take that one step and another step. And we may not know what that's coming up to and what that result is gonna be. But then when we start looking back and you see all those things, it's like, yes, this was God here, this was God here. And so that's beautiful. That's a beautiful story.
yeah, and the one thing I'll add now, what I know now that I didn't know a year ago when I stepped down and my inclinations were right, they are closing the division that I worked in of the company.
Mm,
So I would have been without a job this year.
right.
God just said, just step down 1 year early so I can get you. And I can see now how he's taken me along the steps, but he's always working behind the scenes,
Yes.
getting us prepared, but he's never going. But it seems like even now, the areas where I need maybe still a little help in, it seems like there's something else that's just being provided that I can tap into and learn and get some guidance on and some help.
Yeah.
And something that I just prayed for recently, I applied for and hopefully get accepted in and take it because I need that help in that particular thing. And it's
Awesome.
like that happened with a visibility boot camp. I needed that challenge, but then this next thing that I think Francine's, I signed up for it because I know that I need help targeting and getting the right message. I have not a clue what to do. I
Right.
do, but then it's getting that target,
Yeah. Yeah.
so
But isn't it though amazing? Like again, when we take the time to reflect on where we've come from and the processes and the things that through all of that, God has his hand there. And he's guiding us and he's drawing us to him. And he knows what we need when we need it. And and he knows our personalities, so he works with us individually to give us those reassurances and to say, come on, take that next step and everything and stuff.
yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah,
so
because change
that's
is, not all bad. It's
right.
just it can be but even if it is a challenge, we learn from every one of them,
Yeah.
and that's
Yeah.
the blessings we receive from God.
Yeah, I agree. So let me ask you this. So knowing what you know now, what would you say to someone who's like in the middle of a fire or in the middle of feeling like they're drowning, or they're just like, I don't know what's happening. I don't know what God's wanting or whatever. What would you say to that person, knowing what you don't know about your life and how God worked in your life?
I think one thing I have to remember is I need to kind of ask a question to them to find out where they are drowning, where they are in their life,
Mhm.
because I think as coaches, I'm a firm believer that we need to meet, and even as not coach,
Right.
we need to meet people where they
Where they
are,
are.
but we need to respect them. We need to
Mhm.
accept it. We may not always approve of everything, or agree, but I think that's the one thing I would have to ask some questions to find out where they are. And the questions be, well, why do you feel this way? Is there a trigger mechanism that makes you feel like you're afraid to move forward or afraid for this? Because that trigger mechanism is going to help them, I feel like, get back to the root of that problem.
Yeah.
And I would do it also in a confrontational way, because I had to ask myself that, and I didn't have a coach or anybody. God was my coach.
That was your
And I'm
coach.
like, God, it's been taking him about 50 years to reveal it. I think I always knew what it was, but I just didn't want to, do anything about it. But
Right.
I'm like, you know, but God knew when I was ready.
Hmm.
And it's like, you can't force anybody. But I would be to say to that person is like, you're not alone in this. People have gone through it. But
Yeah.
I said, I would be willing to listen and help. And if I'm not able to do the help, then I would do my best to try to find out somebody who could help for that particular case. But the thing is, knowing what I do know, you can walk through it. You can make the choice, but the choice is yours.
Yeah.
Because, and also, when I talk about the heart, and these are kind of this kind of a question, being part of evangelism explosion in a church 30 years ago, if I didn't remember, remember certain things, but there's one question that I would always ask, because I would want to know where their heart is in their relationship with Jesus. And it's like, if you were to stand before God right now and he would ask you, why should I let you into my heaven? What would you say?
Mhm.
It's a non-confrontational question, but there's a wrong and there's a right answer per God, not me.
Right.
But I would ask that question because I think that gets to their heart, that gets an idea of where to go about in case they do become a client. But I
Mhm.
would reassure them that they're not by themselves.
Right.
People may have gone through something worse,
Yeah.
but also reassure them that God loves them and that they are a beloved chosen child of God, because that's where our identity in Christ comes from.
Yeah. 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 I think too often, I know this is something that, even with me, is that, you know, I think one of Satan's baits, or one of his tools, however you want to say it, is that to convince us that we are alone, that we're the only one that's going through that nobody else would understand. And so, knowing that through all of it, that we're not going through it alone, and that God is really there for us and
Hmm.
everything. And when you said, meeting people where they are, the first thing that popped in my mind was, Jesus meeting the woman at the well.
Yep.
And I mean, when you said that, that came to my mind.
Yeah. And
Um,
we can't separate ourselves from, you know, I had this discussion or kind of go on a, a LinkedIn post today. They were talking about we can't separate ourselves from those that are oppressed in the world or false leaders. We, you know, Jesus was around them constantly and he still spoke the good news, because even those that might be persecute us, we're to love them and meet them where they are. But we don't have to surround ourselves with them on a consistent basis. So I think that's where, I kind of wanted to add that in, because it's not an either or, it's an and. We have to,
right,
because, and we don't have to endure the conflict. I personally don't like conflict. I avoid it even now, but I
right,
know enough to stand up for myself and for God to a certain degree.
right. Mm.
Yeah.
So now, is there a life verse? Is there a verse that you go to? And I know it's hard to narrow down to one verse because I've got several different verses, but is there one that kind of is your life verse?
Yeah, there's like many. I was asked
Right.
that question once before, and I went through all four of them.
Okay. Okay.
But no, I would say, because they remind me of my thought process and coaching. Um, but I would say the one that is the last one is Isaiah 40, chapter 40, verse 31. And it just, that one, I don't have the verse in front of me, but it speaks of that we wait and we hope on the Lord, and we'll fly high on wings like eagles, and
Yes.
run and not grow weary, and walk and not faint, because that's where our strength comes in. I forgot that word. I sort of paraphrased it.
Yeah. That verse is on my wall right back there.
Yeah, it's not
So
on my wall, but it just reminds me that even in times when like I get exhausted, the hope in the Lord always brings a refreshing strength,
yes.
and it allows me to soar above the challenges that life brings, and it just keeps me moving forward. And I need to wait on his timing. So it's a constant reminder, because that's where my impatience grows a little bit, but it's not as bad as it used to be.
Yeah.
I think that's just because we grow,
Yes.
each day.
Yeah. I would agree. So you have a blog and you have a book and you will have a website, but how do people find you? And I know you're on some of the social medias and everything. So how do people find you?
Well, the best place right now, because I just got a link tree. And so the best thing to do is if you go to Instagram, that's the easiest place to see it. If
Instagram.
you go to Instagram, you have an Instagram account, just go to A Wooten, AWOOTEN 77. And if you click on my bio, you will see that link tree link, and that link will have the freebie that I have where it silence your inner critic. That's free, that they can grab that. And then it's got the link to the blog. The blog is going to stay on Substack, and that's plainly annwooten.substack.com. And when I do get the website up, that's going to be annwooten.com.
Okay.
So I'm trying to keep it simple,
Right.
simple,
Yeah.
stupid, but and then I feel like YouTube is where I've got most of the music, and that's just the songs that I have put up there. There's not, a whole lot, but maybe we'll see what God, but that's Anne Wooten music. So, and I'm on Facebook, and it's just Anne Wooten, and LinkedIn is the same thing, Anne Wooten. But Linktree is the best place to find them.
All right. And you said your book is on Amazon and it is called again,
Where Faith Takes Flight.
Where Faith Takes Flight. So I will encourage you all to check out her book. I have not written, I have read, I am tongue tied. I have read some of her poetry and her writings and stuff, and it's just beautiful and everything. So check that out, and we appreciate you for being here today, Anne. And can't wait to hear more of what the amazing things that God has in store for you and the people that that you come in contact with.
Well, thank you so much, Violet, for letting me be a guest on this. I mean, it truly blesses me just to be, and humbles me to be able to do it.
Well, thank you. All right, everyone, till next time, y'all have a blessed day.